public and indeed Statistician staff members. We come back regularly on the governance, public safety and justice survey results, and this time focusing on the victims of crime for 2021-2022. I want to say up front that the difficult questions, the team is here. They answer the difficult questions. The simple questions, bring them to me. Can you hear me clearly? Or should we increase the volume? Is it clear? Ashwell can't hear me. Or is it okay? Okay, they say it's okay. So I can continue talking. Now, on the victims of crime for 2021-2022, we are saying, what has happened now? I don't know. Somehow something changed. Okay, we got it right. We are saying that the governance, public safety and justice survey looks at issues in general, but we have started conducting the victims of crime back as 1998, and indeed Statistician resumed the survey back in 2011 to 2017-18, based on the total of about 30,000 households. And indeed, we will remember that when it was redesigned in 2017, the victims of crime made room for information that had to come generally on governance, but particularly it retains that victims of crime content. And going forward, we are saying that it does complement the SAPS, or the South African Police Services crime statistics, by providing estimates that cannot be measured through police stations. So we'll remember that when you look at the crime statistics by the South African Police Services, is what got reported at police stations. Whereas in our case, we go and talk to members of the public, whether they have reported or not, and we will come to that. And we look at households and individual perceptions around crime, general safety, and in line with social issues and gender norms. So we're going to come back to that, but let us first give a context of what we are making available. We will remember that when we were knocked by COVID-19, especially from highest levels of lockdown where there was no movement, we had to be innovative, as Statistician, and we moved from face-to-face computer-assisted personal interviews to computer-assisted telephone interviews, meaning that our field workers then could work from an office or from home and call respondents. And as they did so, we had to make sure that we have to calibrate the numbers back to some base year. So the 2018 mid-year population estimates are where we calibrated back to. It's very critical. It's because we want to ease out a bias for those that tend to have telephones that we are reaching out to, and those that we know we are not reaching out to in the form of those without telephones. And of course, the 2021-2022 did allow a slight respite, where Statistician were able to make short visits to households without telephone numbers. It's because COVID-19 restrictions were being eased out, and as they were being eased out, it made it possible for our team of field workers to visit the households. And in the process, as Statistician, we have always been beaten up to say, no, your response rates tend to be very low. Indeed, when you are facing a situation that has a COVID-19 environment, response rates will be low because people are uncomfortable to open their doors. But even now, with COVID-19 restrictions eased out of society, members of the public are still not comfortable to allow us out there. But we have to make sure that we do sufficient quality checks to ensure that whatever we made in the public doesn't come back to make it difficult for the public to plan and make decisions. And as such, these quality checks become very, very critical. Now, we are going to talk about victims of crime, household experience. And we are saying we are going to look at issues of housebreaking, home robbery, theft of motor vehicles, murder, assault, and sexual offenses. Let us look at what happened. Around 2.2 million households experienced housebreaking or burglary during the past 5 years. The experience of housebreaking has increased by 14% from the previous year. So we are looking at the previous 5 years because we will look also in the 12 months, but it's very critical that we look at what happened in the past 5 years because there are so many experiences. If you were to look only at 12 months, you would miss certain crimes that were not reported in the 12 months to police and were later reported outside the 12 months period. So we have to cover the 5 years and we'll come to the 12 months later. It is also very critical to note that we will see a dip in most of our reporting in the year 2020-2021. It's because there was no movement in the society because of strict levels of COVID-19. Criminals take advantage of social and human behavior, or perpetrators, so I should say. When there's movement, that's where they thrive. When there are restrictions, especially those that were monitored by the police around COVID-19, they were not readily moving around as we would have seen. So that is why when we come out of 2017-2018, we see a steady rise. But coming out of 2019-2020, which was the highest, we see then a decline in the 2020-2021, all the way up as to 2.2 million in the past 5 years, as we are now going back to normal life. So we are also saying that about 394,000 households experienced home robbery during the past 5 years, and the experience of home robbery increased by 26% from the previous year. It's quite interesting because housebreaking, these learned colleagues here tell me that this is what happens when you are not at home. You are at work or you've gone shopping and someone comes and breaks into your house when there are no people. Home robbery is when there are people. So we can already see that when you look at the previous slide, perpetrators take advantage when there are no people in the house. So it's very critical to understand that crime follows patterns of social behavior. And when they know that you are at home, then we can see that it comes to about 394,000 versus the 2.2 million that we have seen in the previous slide. In terms of car theft, we are saying that 163,000 households experienced car theft during the past 5 years. And indeed, this is a decrease by 23%, as we can see that from the previous year. We were sitting at 212,000 in the year 2020 to 21, and we are now sitting at 163,000 in the year 2021 to 2022, of course, with a reference of that past 5 year period. Having said so, we are saying that around 40,000 households experienced murder during the past 5 years, and this experience decreased by 7% from the previous year. Now, let us look at assault. About 213,000 households experienced assault during the past 5 years, and the experience of assault increased by 70% from the previous year. As we can see that in the 2020-2021, we were sitting at 125,000 and we went to 213,000 in the year 2021-22, of course, with a reference of the past 5 years. Around 32,000 households experienced sexual offenses during the past 5 years, which is an increase by 28% from the previous year. Now, we are looking at the share, the percentage share, and this is in terms of the population. So about 5.4% of households in South Africa experienced housebreaking in the year in 2021-2022. And this 5.4% is representative of 983,000. But when we go further, we look at the increase. We are saying that households that experienced housebreaking increased by 21.5% in the 2021-2022 period. And of course, now we are looking at the past 12 months. And indeed, we can see that home robbery, while house breaking was an experience of 983,000, home robbery was 155,000. And of course, that contrast of house breaking when people are not at home and home robbery when people are at home. The highest proportion, that is 7.9% of households that experienced house breaking, was in KwaZulu-Natal, whereas in Limpopo we experienced the lowest, sitting at 3.8%. So we can see that when you look at KwaZulu-Natal sitting at 255,000 with that share of 7.9%, apologies, but also we can see, for example, in the Northwest, 7.8%. Is because when you look at these absolute numbers and then you look at the proportions within the province, then you start seeing those movements. That is why looking at the Northwest, which is lower than Gauteng, Western Cape. Are you okay? Yeah. I will repeat, because his mic wants to capture what I said. The highest proportion, that is 7.9% of households that experienced housebreaking, were in KwaZulu-Natal. And in Limpopo, we experienced the lowest, sitting at 3.8%. And these proportions are looking at the population size within the provinces. It is easy to look at KwaZulu-Natal and say, yes, it is the highest. But when you come to Gauteng, Western Cape, and the Eastern Cape, which are higher than the Northwest, you can see that the proportion for the Northwest is higher. That is intra-province population size. So it's very critical that we look at these experiences in relation to the population within the province. Incidents of housebreaking peaked in December and June. That is in December, 146,000 in the last 12 months. And in June, 147,000. And of course, I know there's a question, so the clever colleagues seated here are already preparing their answers. That is why you see them looking at each other, agreeing on who will respond to this question. But it's a way of me deferring, having to respond to difficult questions. So I defer from the public stage. About 95% of households that experienced murder reported some or all incidents to the police. As we can see that when you look at murder right at the top, 95% was reported, and the sexual offenses, 90% was reported. Whereas when we look at this, these are in relation to the absolute numbers. So when we look at house breaking versus burglary, or house breaking stroke burglary, we are seeing that it has the highest incidents at 1.4 million, whereas those that were reported were 59.2%. And I want us to compare that with murder, which was sitting at 20,000 incidents, and the reporting was sitting at 95% with the police in terms of some or all incidents. Individual experiences. In terms of individual experiences of crime, we are looking at theft of personal property, street robbery, hijacking, and consumer fraud. You will have realized that when we talk about, in the previous slides, when we talk about car theft, I think a theft of motor vehicle is when your vehicle is stolen when you are not there. So you park it somewhere, you come back from shopping, or you wake up in the morning, you find it's missing and you are not there. Whereas in terms of hijacking is when you are with the vehicle yourself or driving at that point in time. But we also look at consumer fraud. Now, we are saying 2.9 million individuals experienced theft of personal property during the past 5 years. And of course, this is an increase by 41% from the previous year. And we are saying that about 1 million individuals aged 16 years and above experienced consumer fraud during the past 5 years. Consumer fraud includes advanced fee fraud, like your 99 rand that goes through your debit, debit card scams and the like, online shopping and the like. And of course, this was an increase by 74.4 from the previous period. That is when we're referring to the previous period as reported in the previous year. Now, there's a significant increase in hijacking between the year 2020-2021 period and the 2021-2022 period, with around 330 persons experiencing hijacking during the past 5 years. As we can see that in the period that we referred to in the 2020-21, there were 151,000, and now we have gone all the way to 330,000, of course, in the past 5 years as a reference point. Now, 799,000 individuals experienced street robbery during the past 5 years. This experience decreased by 4% from the previous reporting period of 2020-2021. Consumer fraud overtook robbery, with 1 million individuals experiencing the crime during the past 5 years. As we can see that the blue line is overtaking the black line in terms of street robbery, whereas theft of personal property still is the highest, sitting at 2.9 million in the past 5 years. And of course, we can see that while street robbery shows a decline, we see hijacking sitting at 330,000 and consumer fraud showing an increase, a steady increase. About 1.1 million persons aged 16 years and older experienced theft of personal property in the 2021-2022 period, and this was about 2.6% of the population of people aged 16 years and above. And of course, we can see 134,000 of hijackings represent 0.3 of a percentage point in terms of the population of persons aged 16 years and above. Theft of personal property increased by 51% in the 2021-2022 period, as we can see that the lighter color is actually superseding a lot of the gray color, whereas street robbery declined by 19.1%. You can see that the lighter color is superseded by the gray color. Incidents of theft of personal property peaked in June with about 228,000 incidents in the past 12 months. Felicia, when it's time to, not Felicia, today's Vuile, when it's time, just show me to stop. I will stop, but the members of the media are going to refuse because they still want me to continue until they see the Helakwala slide. So don't try to stop me. You can only announce when the embargo is lifted. Listen, she says there's no embargo. Now she brings all of them to come and lock them up here. You must keep the embargo at all times, because I know some of the media houses break the embargo when we have an embargo. So keep the word embargo ongoing. But let me proceed with the presentations. Members of the media houses, you must know there's always an embargo, because otherwise there will be confusion. Yeah. Now, 3.2% of youth, that is those aged 16 years to 34 years, experienced loss of personal property through theft. You can see they are the highest. Young adults are sitting at 2.5%. That is of the population. And of course, those aged 50 to 64%, 2.2%. Those 65 years and above, 1.4%. And when I asked the colleagues here, the enlightened colleagues, they told me that these young people walk a lot. And I'm not sure if they will be happy solely to hear that. Because they will say, we who are older than them come and report like this about them. Now, 62.9% of individuals that experienced hijacking reported the matter in terms of some or all incidents to the police, as we can see at the top. And of course, that is still not the highest in terms of absolute numbers. In terms of theft of personal property, right at the bottom, we are sitting at 1.3 million, whereas in terms of those incidents that were reported, as in some or all, to the police, we're sitting at 30.8%. And that is in the past 12 months. Individual perceptions of safety. We are saying that individuals who felt safe walking alone in their neighborhood during the day decreased from 84.8% in the 2020-2021 period to 81.3%. If you look at the right-hand side, you will see that there's a decrease in terms of those that in the 2020-21 period at 84.8%, and that decreased to 81.3%. And of course, those who felt safe walking alone at night decreased as well, from 39.6 in the period 2020-21 to 36%. And we can see that. Whereas individuals aged 16 years and above, regardless of sex, felt unsafe walking alone at night in their neighborhood. And when we look at that, we are seeing a larger proportion of people in rural areas felt safe walking alone at night in their neighborhood compared to people in urban areas. As we can see that the brown color of rural people shows that the people in rural areas feel safe walking alone at night. Other than staying here in Pretoria, like most South Africans, I'm a rural person as well. So I feel very safe in those rural areas. than I feel here in the urban areas where I always have to look over my shoulder. But that's an anecdotal issue I can raise. More individuals, that is 47.7%, are now doing something to protect themselves against crime. Now, I don't want us to say they are doing something to start arming themselves. So I want us to look at the next slide. It's going to tell us better what they are doing. You see what they are doing? 36.6% have altered their walking patterns. As you can see, I only walk during safer hours, or I do not walk alone anymore. So you can see, so when we say they are doing something, we are saying that they altered their walking patterns, because I know when you put this slide, it's like now they are already arming themselves, and it's not the case. About slightly more than a third altered their walking patterns. It's like myself and one DDG, we see Ashwell Jineka, we have altered our walking patterns as well. Nearly half of the individuals who have not taken measures to protect themselves say that there's either nothing they can do or do not know what to do. So you can see that on the right-hand side, 28.2% says there's nothing I can do, and about 20.8% says say I do not know what to do. So when you bring those together, we are going to about half of individuals. But you must look at the next slide. When seeing a person committing crime, about 51% said they will call the police, and 31% said they will call the neighbor. So you can see the trust in the police of people saying, I'll call the police, is sitting at 51%, and there's a gap of about 20 percentage points to the next one when they call the neighbor. As statisticians, we have to look at all issues. Some will call the security services at 7%, 4.2%. They walk alone. Away, not walk alone. They see crime, they just walk away. And then, but look at the smallest one, 0.8%, say they just watch. So they take their cell phone and start recording, and then they watch. Yeah. Now, let us recap. We are saying that households' levels of crime, about 1.4 million incidents of households occurred in 2021 to 2022. In terms of, that was households, affecting 983 households in South Africa in relation to incidents. And of course, about 59% of those experiences were reported to the police. An estimate of about 205 incidents of home robbery occurred, affecting 155,000 households. And of course, those that were reported to the police were 66%. In terms of individual crime levels, an estimate of 1.3 million incidents of theft of personal property occurred, and of course affecting 1.1 million individuals aged 16 years and above. And of course, of those, 31% were reported to the police. A total of 246,000, that is 0.6% of adults aged 16 years and older, in terms of individuals, experienced street robbery in a total of 295 incidents. And of those, about 34% of victims reported some or all incidents to the police. In terms of feeling safe, we can see that in terms of feeling safe during the day, it has declined, as is feeling safe during the night. About 81% of the population felt safe walking alone in their neighborhood, and versus during the day versus 36% at night. And in both cases, we have seen declines of feeling safe from the 2020-2021 period. And similarly, rural residents had a greater feeling of walking alone in their neighborhood compared to urban people. And of course, 30.4% of the population indicated that they only walked during safer hours. And of course, 28.8% indicated that they have taken physical protection measures for their home as a main thing that they had to do. Now, they said I must not forget, because members of the public are already complaining that stats say you were there during the census wearing green T-shirts, and then you were there during the post-enumeration survey wearing the orange T-shirts, but you are still there. And indeed, our field workers who rely on members of the public and indeed members of the media, you have to keep on encouraging members of the public to respond to our field workers for purposes that we can report better to them. So there's geospatial, a spatial information frame, there's the quarterly labor force survey, which is collected quarterly, the general household survey, January to December, domestic tourism survey, January to December, the governance, public safety, justice, April 2022, all the way to March 2023. The consumer price index is ongoing every month, and indeed income and expenditure survey for 12 months, that is November 2022 to November 2023, and the income and expenditure survey will help us give an estimate of poverty in the country. And in case I forget, we are already starting with training. We have already started with training for those who will be out there. About 2,000 field workers or colleagues are being trained, and they will be flooding the nation to deal with this issue, because we need to know what is happening. And of course, we want to thank members of the public for participating in Census 2022, which has not been an easy task, as you will have seen, that we have had to extend the period of collection. And we need to thank you very much as members of the public for having availed yourselves as we come back again and again in terms of data collection. This slide says Ndihela Kwala, meaning that I finish here in isiXhosa. Sivu trains me to speak in isiXhosa. Says that's how they say it in isiXhosa. And in Isipedi, Setswana, Sesotho, they say Kifetsa Onamo. And in Chivenda, they say Ndifela Hanefa. And in isiZulu, they say Angnamaningi. They want to say Angnamaningi Amagam. So I don't have a lot of words. Ndihela Kwala in English and Afrikaans says finish and klar. And I want to, and where I come from, they can't say finish and klar. They say finish and klar. So I want to assure you that the next slide is blank. I thank you.
Thanks, SG. This was quite informative, and it's that time now to take questions from the members of the media. We have two sets of media today. We are having media and other stakeholders who are online, who have logged in MS Teams. Faisal Mohammed will control that part. He will tell us when there are questions, and then we members of the media who are present at the venue can also have an opportunity to ask questions. That's the hybrid system that we have inherited from COVID, colleagues, and I think we're making use of it. Thanks. Yes, sir, you can take a question.
Thank you very much. Marlon Saudi from...
No, they will bring you a mic.
Okay.
Because the others won't hear you.
All right. From Newsroom Africa. Just a question to you, about the stats. It shows that in terms of housebreaking, in terms of people also not feeling safe when they are walking and other related crimes, it speaks perhaps to a lack of visible policing. How do these stats then assist in that particular instance? Are you going to share these, particularly with the crime prevention cluster, vis-a-vis the Minister of Police and relevant other public safety officials provincially in the worst affected provinces, etc.?
Okay. Do we have another question? Okay.
Thank you so much. My name is Gordon Whittles from ENCA for the Statistician-General. Generally, would you say that South Africa is becoming a more unsafe country? That the people of South Africa feel more unsafe? And then, just some clarity, maybe we're misinterpreting these numbers. What accounts for these significant increases from the previous year? For example, I see here that it says house robbery increased by 26% from the previous year, but if you look at the year before COVID, it looks like there's been a decrease in house robbery because it was 415,000 2019-2020, and then to 394,000 in 2021-2022. So these significant increases of 23%, 70% in one instance, are they only because of COVID? And comprehensively, are these increases much smaller? And then that's it for now.
I think for now, let me allow those two questions to be answered, and over to you, Statistician-General.
I will start with the second question from ENCA. What we are seeing is that from the 2020-21 reporting period to the 2021-2022 reporting period, we are seeing a rise. But when you look in almost all crime incidents, particularly at household level, if you look at 2019, 2017, 2018, 2018, 2019, all the way to 2019, 2020, we have been seeing a steady rise. And then all of a sudden, 2020, 2021, there's a decline. It's because crime patterns follow social behavior. And particularly at household level, one is that in some of them, especially home robbery, is because the people were at home, even during the day, during highest levels of lockdown and different stages of lockdown. So criminals could not hatch a surprise, especially where they want to rob people, to have robbery or burglary when people are not at home, housebreaking. And then when COVID-19 environment started easing off in terms of people starting to move about freely, we are seeing both at the household level as well as at individual level in terms of theft of personal property, we are seeing a rise, because then there's enough socialization in the public space, and people are able to move around, and so that is what we are seeing. And I know the next question you are going to ask us is, are we going to see that over a period of time? We will go and measure and we'll come back and report. We will try and not speculate, as that's a say, because then anything can change out there. Now, Newsroom Africa, the question of feeling safe, and you are asking this question in a compounded way. Is South Africa an unsafe country? We can't say South Africa is an unsafe country. All we do is to measure and compare, even with previous cases. So what we have picked up in the 2021-2022 period is that people felt unsafe walking in their neighborhood, both during the day and at night, as has happened in previous years. But we see that there is a decrease in terms of those people, individuals. In the 2020-2021 period, about 83.4% were saying that they are feeling unsafe to walk in their neighborhood. And then 81%, am I right, Nozi? 81%, that is during the day. And at night, we see a decrease as well, from about 36.6 to about 36%, 39.6. So that's what we can measure. But it's not our remit to put adjectives as to whether South Africa is safe or unsafe. We can only say what the individuals are saying. 81% are saying they feel unsafe walking. They feel unsafe, am I right? Or safe? No, not unsafe, yes. They feel safe, my apologies. 81% of individuals say they feel safe walking during the day, and 36%. So we see a decrease. There were higher numbers of people who were saying they were feeling safe in the previous period, but now it has decreased a bit. And but what will happen in the future is that we are going to measure and we'll come back. Thanks. Don't make me speak.
Okay. Let's check with Faisal if are there any members of the media online who would like to take a question. Okay. Okay. We'll take a follow-up from ENCA and from Newsroom Africa.
Yes, yes. They have reminded me. Do you want me to go back to the mic? Yes, please. Official statistics are a public good. That is why they are released equally to everyone at the same time. So there's no pre-site. So we don't go and talk to the executive in the form of ministers, deputy ministers first, and go to talk to Parliament before we release them to the public, which is different with many reports which must be shared through the executive. And in some cases, you will see that when they are shared in the public space, they are shared by the minister. In our case, we have to uphold that independence of the function of Statistics South Africa, like any other national statistical agency in the world, in that while the Statistician-General reports to the Minister in the Presidency, Minister Mondli Gungubele, the numbers are released by the Statistician-General so that we maintain that independence, both in form and practice. And as such, when these numbers are released, they are made available to every member of the public. Of course, we know that government is our biggest user. in terms of the data. But so is the private sector. When you look at our economic indicators, the private sector uses our data a lot. Even incidents of crime, the private sector has interest because they have to set up businesses in neighborhoods and the like. So they take interest. And we do, from time to time, share this information with the executive in the form of different ministers, depending on what release we are making, as well as in the form of myself with fellow directors general and critical stakeholders. So I must assure you that these numbers will not be released and be hidden somewhere. Firstly, we rely on yourselves as members of the media to make sure that they get as much traction as possible. And that also increases debate between members of the public and those that they elect into public office to represent them. Having said so, Newsroom Africa, I can assure you that we are going to share this information as widely as possible, including with our colleagues in the security cluster who have to know. And we must know that this information is released on the footsteps of crime statistics that were released in the last 10 days or so. You will remember that traditionally around September, the crime statistics get released. And as they get released, we would already naturally have released these numbers before, but we are not in competition. The crime statistics released by the South African Police Services are official statistics as delegated to the South African Police Services to release. When we say official statistics, is that the Statistician-General, and only the Statistician-General can certify data as official. So having certified such data, then we make that, that data is made available, and that status can be upheld by South African Police Services when they uphold the prescripts we give them. And it can be relegated at any given point based on them failing to uphold certain practices. One of the practices you will remember, previously, crime statistics were released by the Minister of Police in Parliament. Now we had to deal with that issue, that you cannot have political leaders releasing crime statistics. So what happens now, you will have seen, the Minister of Police, Minister Kele, gives a statement, and the statisticians at South African Police Services, and mostly it's Mr. Norman Skukune, who will talk on these numbers. So we are removing that political responsibility, because official statistics must be released by statisticians. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that explanation, SG. Faisal has a question, and then we also have a follow-up from ENCA and Newsroom Africa. Faisal? Hi, Bonisa.
The sufficient, I'm just a member of the public, I'm not a media house. Let me just explain. There are two areas in the report that I was looking at.